What would happen if King Charles ever needed to significantly reduce his royal workload? A dramatic story circulating around the monarchy imagines exactly that scenario, placing Prince William and Catherine at the center of a major transition, while raising questions about Queen Camilla's future influence. The account describes secret meetings, disputed palace authority, and even a handwritten restriction supposedly issued by the king. But these extraordinary details are not supported by evidence in the supplied material. So rather than treating them as breaking news, let's examine the story for what it is, an intriguing hypothetical about power, duty, and royal continuity. The narrative begins by portraying Charles as increasingly concerned about balancing his responsibilities with his health. In reality, changes to a monarch's workload can naturally create questions about who performs particular duties, but the script goes considerably further. It claims William had quietly begun absorbing more responsibilities before an alleged private medical warning forced Charles to reconsider his schedule. No documentation is provided confirming the described medical conversation. Within the story, however, Charles eventually concludes that maintaining stability does not necessarily mean personally carrying every responsibility. Instead, continuity may require allowing the next generation to become increasingly visible. According to the account, William, Catherine, and Princess Anne were then summoned to an extraordinary private meeting concerning royal continuity. A document supposedly outlined responsibilities William could assume, including important audiences, appointments, and long-term planning. Catherine, meanwhile, was allegedly expected to take on more visible ceremonial responsibilities. These specific arrangements are not established by evidence in the supplied script. Still, the scenario highlights something important about royal transitions. Public perception matters. Every additional duty performed by an heir can be interpreted as preparation for the future, even when the reigning monarch remains fully in constitutional position. The story becomes much more dramatic when Princess Anne supposedly introduces another folder containing plans associated with Camilla's household. According to the narrative, these papers discussed ways her office might retain influence if Charles stepped back from some duties. This is a serious allegation, yet the source does not provide authenticated documents proving such a plan existed. Without that evidence, it would be misleading to portray Camilla as secretly attempting to control William's authority. Nevertheless, the fictionalized conflict creates the central question driving the story: if responsibilities shift temporarily. Should there be one clearly defined center of authority or several competing advisory structures? In the narrative, William supposedly becomes concerned that an informal advisory arrangement could leave him responsible for decisions without giving him clear authority to make them. Catherine raises an equally important question: what would happen whenever different royal offices disagreed? Again, these private conversations remain unsupported. But as an institutional principle, unclear responsibility can create genuine problems. If one person carries public accountability while another retains private influence, decisions can become confusing. The story therefore reframes what initially appears to be a family disagreement into a governance issue. How should authority be distributed when personal relationships and official responsibilities overlap? Camilla is then portrayed as defending the experience of her household rather than openly demanding power. According to the account, she argues that continuity would benefit from advisors already familiar with ceremonial traditions, charities, and royal schedules. Catherine's supposed response exposes the weakness in that arrangement. Who has the final word when offices disagree? The script presents Charles as eventually deciding that a temporary transfer could only work if responsibilities were unmistakably defined. However, no verified palace document supplied here confirms this exchange or decision. The important distinction remains between a plausible discussion about institutional organization and an unsupported claim that Camilla attempted a palace power grab. The account claims advisors subsequently rewrote the proposed arrangement, so William would carry significant responsibilities while Catherine handled prominent public and ceremonial programs. Princess Anne supposedly remained involved as a stabilizing senior figure. Then comes the story's biggest claim. Charles allegedly added handwritten language, preventing Camilla's household from challenging William's authority. The supplied material does not authenticate such an order, and therefore this cannot responsibly be described as a legally binding royal decree. Still, as a dramatic device, the handwritten sentence represents Charles choosing institutional clarity over ambiguity and attempting to ensure that delegated responsibility would not be undermined by competing channels. According to the narrative, Camilla received the supposed order before any public announcement and immediately understood its implications. She would retain her title and personal position, but would allegedly lose the ability to influence decisions transferred to William and Catherine. The story depicts her as declining to participate in a carefully staged public appearance afterward. Again, no reliable evidence in the supplied material confirms this sequence. An absence from an event would not, by itself, demonstrate a royal dispute. Yet within the story's framework, Camilla's absence functions symbolically. The monarchy's visible center of gravity is portrayed as moving toward William and Catherine. The narrative then imagines Charles addressing the country personally. Rather than abdicating, he supposedly explains that reducing some responsibilities is necessary, while William assumes a larger operational role. Catherine is simultaneously presented as taking on increasingly prominent ceremonial duties. These details should not be confused with an actual succession announcement. Delegating duties does not automatically make William king or Catherine queen, and constitutional succession is different from sharing workload. That distinction is crucial. The story deliberately blurs those ideas for dramatic effect, but a responsible retelling should separate them. Increased visibility for an heir can signal preparation and continuity without representing a change of sovereign. The account places enormous emphasis on images of William and Catherine standing beneath royal insignia as symbols of a generational transition. Such imagery would certainly attract commentary because monarchy relies heavily on ceremony and visual symbolism. But photographs cannot independently prove that constitutional authority has changed. Within the narrative, Charles supposedly emphasizes that William did not request greater responsibility, protecting his son from accusations of ambition. This creates one of the more interesting themes in the story. An heir must prepare to lead while avoiding the appearance that he is impatient to inherit. Duty and ambition can look remarkably similar when viewed entirely from outside palace walls. Later, the story claims Charles privately explains why he wanted unusually strict boundaries around William's authority. His supposed concern was that stepping away publicly while continuing to resolve disagreements privately would defeat the purpose of reducing his workload. That logic is understandable, even though the described conversation is unverified. Effective delegation requires more than assigning tasks. It requires allowing the person receiving those tasks to make decisions within their remit. The narrative, therefore, presents Charles not as choosing his son over his wife personally, but as supposedly separating family loyalty from institutional responsibility. Whether such a confrontation actually occurred is another question entirely. Catherine's position in the story is equally significant. She is not portrayed merely as standing beside William, but as receiving her own responsibilities involving diplomacy, ceremonies, and public-facing royal programs. Again, those exact assignments are claims from the supplied narrative rather than verified announcements. Still, Catherine already occupies a prominent position as Princess of Wales, making public interest in her future role inevitable. Any genuine transition would likely be judged not only by what William does, but also by how the couple operate together. The monarchy's next generation is increasingly viewed through both of them rather than through William alone. The supplied account goes even further, by describing a second document allegedly addressing Camilla's household privileges, staff access, and use of royal residences. These are especially sensitive claims, and the script provides no authenticated paperwork supporting them. It would therefore be inappropriate to state that Camilla was banished, stripped of her title, or permanently removed from palace life. Those conclusions go beyond what has been established. What the narrative actually demonstrates is how easily administrative questions can be transformed into sensational personal conflict. Restrictions on responsibilities, if they existed, would not automatically equal punishment or removal from the royal family. Strip away the secret folders and dramatic confrontations, and the story revolves around a much more realistic challenge. How does a centuries-old institution prepare for inevitable generational change while its current monarch remains in place? William must be prepared for greater responsibility without appearing to rush his father's reign. Catherine must develop her public role without being prematurely presented as queen. Camilla's position must remain distinguishable from the future responsibilities of the Prince and Princess of Wales. And Charles, as sovereign, remains at the center of that balance. Those tensions alone are interesting, without turning unsupported palace rumors into established facts. So, did Charles secretly sign an order giving William sweeping authority while blocking Camilla from royal decision-making? The supplied story does not provide sufficient evidence to establish that extraordinary claim. What it does offer is a dramatic scenario about succession, loyalty, and the difficult separation between family relationships and institutional authority. If Charles ever significantly reduces his workload, the way responsibilities are divided will inevitably attract enormous attention. What do you think? Should William and Catherine gradually take on more responsibilities while Charles remains king? Share your view respectfully in the comments, and subscribe for more carefully framed royal family stories and discussions.